Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Wednesday. In today's episode, transfer talks surrounding Olivier Giroud and Fikayo Tomori, and as well Thomas Tuchel, how Chelsea rejected the coach in 2017. But before we get into any of that good stuff, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also hit the like button if you're enjoying the content because it helps out the channel as well. Also want to mention, as we get into the new year, you can listen to a lot of my content as just audio format on podcast. I upload Added Time, Let's Talk Chelsea, my match reviews and collabs, all as audio podcasts as well, so link in the description box below if you're interested in that. But let's get into the first story here from Nazar Kinsella in goal about Olivier Giroud. I spoke about Giroud recently and sort of rumours about him potentially leaving this month, and they were very prevalent a few months ago before Giroud started to get back into the first team. But since returning to the first team and becoming Chelsea's top goal scorer so far this season, it looks likely he will remain at the club once again for the rest of the season. Nazar Kinsella says Giroud is set to remain at Chelsea in January despite Juve interest. Lampard will get his wish to keep the Frenchman at Stamford Bridge for another 6 months as pressure grows over his position in charge of the club. Giroud's contract expires in June 2021 and there is no specific clause that Chelsea can invoke to extend it, having used an option to keep him for another year in 2020. No brainer for me. Anyone suggesting that Olivier Giroud should be off this month, I think is ridiculous. As I say, top goal scorer so far this season for Chelsea, leading the charts, and I wouldn't put it past him ending the season on top of those charts, because at the moment he's an informed player that I think Frank Lampard should be utilising a lot more whilst he's going through this really sticky patch and is under pressure himself. I was stunned that Giroud did not start against Man City, because I felt once again he scored against Aston Villa. Just a player that not only scoring goals but linking up well with other players. To me, it makes no sense he isn't starting more for Lampard, and has shown himself to be a really valuable player in difficult situations for Lampard. I would be too surprised if he does move on after this season, given the nature of his age, wanting more first team football, the likes of Juventus coming in for him. He's doing so well at the moment for Chelsea, and as I say, in difficult moments he's really bailed Lampard out and Chelsea out. You know, last season 1920, that run-in was incredible, and it feels a little bit like deja vu, I'm sure, because we were speaking about Giroud leaving in the last January window, but he has broken into the team a little bit sooner than last season, of course, and it felt like he was basically packed his bags and was going to be off on deadline day, but that did not happen. Started scoring a load of goals and helped us retain Champions League football in the Premier League top four, so hopefully that will be the same case again. Of course, it is a little bit different this season with Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner, seeing how Lampard deals with all those forwards and what he goes with now after a difficult period. Will we stick with Olivier Giroud? Will we go back to Tammy Abraham, or maybe try Timo Werner more down the middle? Let me know your opinions. Do you think Giroud should be Chelsea's main striker? What do you think about the other forwards in the squad, Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner? Do you think they should still be ahead of Olivier Giroud? What do you think of Giroud's future after this season? Would you keep him on for another year despite his age? Let me know in the comments below. And another link and story was about Fikayo Tomori. Fikayo Tomori has to be out on loan this month. It's so bad and detrimental for his career if he remains for the rest of the season, because he's getting no playtime under Frank Lampard. I think it's probably even unlikely that he starts against Morecambe on Sunday in the FA Cup, despite that being a game you think is obvious for him to feature in. Maybe he'll start just to maybe give him some minutes before he goes out on loan. It does seem like a Premier League loan is most likely, and he was very close to signing for West Ham on loan in the last deadline day, but stayed in the final hours of the window, so made his mind up there. But of course, hasn't featured much for Lampard at all this season, with Antonio Rudiger being third choice behind Thiago Silva and Kurt Zouma. And apparently Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds could be the destination for Tomori this window, according to Fabrizio Romano on his podcast. Chelsea will look to loan out Tomori in January, and this week alongside that, BBC Sport named Leeds as Tomori's most likely destination. That's a decent move for him. I'm a little bit concerned about sort of Marcelo Bielsa's defence in terms of the amount of goals they concede, but I think it's pretty simple for Tomori. He has to start getting minutes on the pitch again, whilst he's not getting any for Frank Lampard at the moment. Even when Frank Lampard has had to rotate recently, Tomori doesn't come into the equation, even Christensen getting ahead of him. So yeah, he has to be loaned out. What happens beyond that, I think, is a massive question, given Frank Lampard and the relationship clearly between the two maybe breaking down, or at least him not getting opportunities in the first team whilst he was such a key player for Lampard in the opening months months of 1920. Let me know your opinions about Tomori. Do you think he has a future at Chelsea, even beyond Lampard? Do you think if he goes out on loan, he could return next season and break into the first team? Could he be the replacement for Thiago Silva in the long term? Do you still think he has a future at Chelsea? Let me know in the comments below. And before I wrap up today's episode, I want to touch on this report from Matt Law in the Telegraph about Thomas Tuchel and Chelsea rejecting the coach or being warned off Tuchel's arrival in 2017. I think it's a really interesting piece that we'll get into in terms of the timing of it, matching with Antonio Conte just after we won the Premier League. So as you can see here, revealed Chelsea were warned off Thomas Tuchel in the summer of 2017. As reported by Telegraph Sport on Monday, Chelsea are yet to hit the panic button on head coach Frank Lampard and do not have a ready-made succession plan, with the club hoping he can turn around a poor run of 4 defeats from 6 games. Providing results do not continue to get worse, Lampard is expected to be given time, but that has not stopped agents trying to push the claims of the clients, including Tuchel and Max Allegri, as the vultures begin to swarm around Stamford Bridge. The Telegraph though reveals that Chelsea have already been warned off Tuchel once in the summer of 2017 when the German was pushed as a potential successor to Antonio Conte. Chelsea had feared that Conte could quit after his season in charge of the Blues, and intermediaries were quick to make it clear that Tuchel, who was out of work after being sacked by Borussia Dortmund, would be interested in succeeding the Italian. Tuchel's personality and character have been questioned throughout his coaching career following numerous allegations of rows with his players and employers, with the subject also becoming an issue while he was at PSG. The 47-year-old publicly criticised both the Dortmund and PSG hierarchies and battled with his bosses over transfers, something that has previously been viewed particularly dimly at Chelsea, who have seen coaches such as Mourinho, Conte and to a lesser extent Maurizio Sarri take pot shots at the board in the past. I did speak about this yesterday when we were referencing Thomas Tuchel, and I said about the internal politics of that being a rift for him at Dortmund but also at PSG, and looking at the similarities and the tension potentially at Chelsea if he was to arrive in the future and sort of the difficulty of that. I like Tuchel in his philosophy of football in trying to implement attacking football, because I'd like to see that more from Chelsea. But once again, this is the conversation we get back to constantly around where Chelsea are heading, short term versus long term. And will we just see the same thing over again? You know, Tuchel could do very well, say a bit like Conte, do really well in the opening months at Chelsea, but then it falls apart in the second season. And I think that's something Chelsea need to be concerned about. And it is something that concerns me with coaches coming in. There being disharmony with the board, potentially signing players that are not good for the long term of Chelsea, and then potentially if Tuchel was to leave, say after 2 years, being left with players we don't really want. And that's the issue Chelsea find themselves in now, with a bloated squad of players from Maurizio Sarri's time, but also Antonio Conte's time. I know a lot of people rate Tuchel, and I can understand why. His work at Dortmund, his work with young players, getting PSG to the Champions League final last season, very close to winning that. But for me, I still look at managers like Tuchel and other coaches of his ilk, really, but I do worry about them sort of being, it's a harsh word, but I think it's an irrelevant one, you know, mercenary coaches that come into Chelsea, you know, don't really have the long-term future at Chelsea at heart because they're concerned about the pressure on them, you know, sort of the timer being on them as soon as they sign that dotted line. I know they have not a lot of patience to succeed from the fans, but also the board, and that leads to short-term planning, reactive tactics, and not really instilling their full philosophy because they don't feel like they have the backing of the fans or the board. That's the issue I think Tuchel and Nagelsmann to another extent, and other coaches I think in the modern game who demand a little bit more patience and time to instill more progressive style of play that are a little bit more advanced than say more reactive counter-attacking football. I'm interested to hear your opinions because I know a lot of people bring up Tuchel in the comments as a potential coach for Chelsea in the future. Let me know your opinions on this article. Please go and read it from Matt Law. It's really insightful, gives you a lot of detail, and also thinking back to after winning that Premier League title, because there was a little bit of fear that Conte could leave, of course, sign that contract and then only stayed for 17-18, which went quite horrendously wrong in terms of the Premier League and defending the title. And now looking at this report and thinking about the current situation with Lampard, would Tuchel be considered again for the Chelsea top job? But that is it for this edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.